It's one of the most breathtaking entrances to any city in the world. Whether it's the first time or the 100th time, emerging through the Fort Pitt Tunnel is a marvelous vision, a majestic testimony to the beauty of a city and the enduring commitment of those who helped create it. This vision is part of Burrell's legacy. Burrell Construction performed the paving work on the Fort Pitt Bridge, just one of many lasting testimonies to the company's enduring contributions to the region. For years, Burrell Construction trucks covered the region. You couldn't drive very far in any direction without spotting our signature red trucks. From its humble beginning with one plant, 5 employees, and just a few pieces of heavy equipment in 1935, Burrell Construction and Supply rapidly grew into one of Pennsylvania's largest construction companies, operating 12 plants and 500 pieces of major equipment with 600 employees. At its peak, Burrell Construction was generating $60 million in annual revenue. Burrell has deep roots in the Alikiski Valley, dating back to March 5, 1915, when its predecessor company, State Construction, started operations in Parnassus, Pennsylvania. In 1928, Charles Booth Sr. took a leave of absence from American Sheet and Tin Plate Company, which later became U.S. Steel, and joined State Construction Company as office manager and secretary. 3 years later, and at the height of the Depression in 1931, Logan National Bank took control of the company and installed Mr. Booth as general manager. A few years later, State Construction was sold to a group of investors that included the King and Booth families as minority stockholders, forming Burrell Construction and Supply Company. Fred King was named president. Charles Booth Sr. became vice president and general manager. His son, Charles Booth Jr., or Chuck as we know him, began his career at Burrell as a laborer, working during his summer vacations in high school and college. He later enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Corps as a flying cadet during World War II. At the early age of 14, Chuck knew he wanted to be a pilot, and he learned the fundamentals of aviation right here on Craigdale Road in New Kensington.
Took the aviation cadet physical down in Pittsburgh and passed, and I was put on the list. And that was in July of 1941. Pearl Harbor came, as you know, on December the 7th. And everyone on the list, they were called up. And so on December the 18th, I was sworn in at the post office in Pittsburgh.
It was this experience which set the stage for his military service, where Chuck had a distinguished career as a command pilot in the 8th Army Air Corps, a predecessor of the United States Air Force. He flew 30 missions over Germany against Hitler's forces, where he was highly decorated, receiving the Purple Heart after he was injured leading his squadron on a successful mission. He also received the Distinguished Service Cross, the Distinguished Flying Cross, and the Air Medal with 5 battle stars. The Distinguished Service Cross was especially meaningful as it is the highest award given by the Army.
Jimmy Doolittle sat at the head of the table. I sat here, Lou Ellis sat there. And we would, before dinner, we'd play croquet out in the yard. We watched the RAF go out on a night mission, and we all talking, and that's when Patton was making a run down through southern France.
Believe it or not, Chuck Booth introduced Ronald Reagan at the Hillcrest Country Club.
I had to be president of the Chamber of Commerce at that time, and we had a General Electric plant in town that made conduit. And he gave a hell of a speech, and one of the funniest things was I introduced him as the Betty Furness of General Electric.
Chuck Booth beat Here's Johnny at cards.
We went to a ranch in Colorado, Lake Mancus Ranch. Somehow he and I got to be friends, and we'd play cards every night. He slammed the card down. He said, "You son of a bitch, you're just like my manager. You beat me all the time."
When the war was over, Chuck returned home to work at Burrell Construction, but he also continued to serve in the Air Force Reserves. Although he retired from the military as a colonel in 1979, he brought the discipline and work ethic he learned as a pilot to help continue to build Burrell and the western Pennsylvania region for more than half a century. Chuck has dedicated his life to Burrell, and at age 98, he still comes to work every day as its co-chairman. Burrell Construction is now Burrell Group Incorporated, but it still remains a family company built on family values that is powered by active participation over the years from the Booth family, including Chuck's two sons, Harvey and Charlie Booth, his grandson, Harvey Booth Jr., and his two son-in-laws, Reed Rotzler and Bob Weil. Today, Burrell Group is owned entirely by the Booth family after the company purchased outstanding shares from King shareholders in 1998. It has spent the last few years evolving into a leaner, more agile, and more diversified company that has interests in mining products, insurance, real estate, and technology. The company also has a mining products partnership in Australia with Adelaide Brighton Limited, a publicly traded company with $1.5 billion in revenue.
I was a 28-year-old freshman state senator when I first met Chuck because we had rented some space in his office building. And let's just say he comes on like a freight train and was just a fascinating guy. I used to wander into the office every once in a while when I wasn't out at a community event, and I would get these great little tidbits of what he had done in his life, and I just am amazed. You know, this decorated pilot from World War II and just a fascinating guy, just really creative. But the one thing that really sticks out, I think, about Chuck more than anything else is here's this guy who's this very accomplished guy who is so busy with his businesses and everything. Yet it seemed like his primary concern was always what's going on in the community. I can tell you that if I had $1 for every time he said, come on, we got to get funding for the AK connector, the bridge that everybody wanted to cross the Allegheny Valley, I would be a wealthy woman, because he pushed and pushed for projects to try to make the valley stronger, give people more opportunity. And you know, he didn't have to do that. Chuck's just the kind of guy who really cares about everything. And there's so much substance to him that he's capable of doing it all. You know, running the company, being successful, being funny as all get out. I mean, that joke book, some of those jokes that are in there are jokes that I've heard millions of times. And yes, we did hear them more than once, but they were still funny. Just a great guy.
A community's quality of life and economic well-being is often tied to a commitment to the education and training of its workforce. Convincing Penn State to open a campus here in the Valley was a major milestone for the region and continues to benefit both residents and businesses in the area.
What I found from Chuck, he has a tremendous, I think, knack for knowing what's good for a community and for how to help it. Libby Blissell brought a president from Penn State down to the area and convinced him to put a campus here. She could not have done that had she not had people in the community who were willing to take a leap and help make that happen. And Chuck was one of the forefathers. He was there from the beginning, and he understood the value that higher ed has, both for individuals but also for communities. If you have an educated community, they're more likely to be healthy, they can command higher wages, they provide a better workforce, a more qualified workforce in some ways for business and industry. And so Chuck realized those benefits and invested in the campus, not just his resources but his time. He had a huge impact on our board early and on the direction that this campus would take. And we moved from the center of New Kensington up here to Upper Burrell in 1966. He started to get involved at the individual level, helping individual students through scholarships, over $500,000. But he also got involved in helping with the community. And I think it really opened my eyes when Chuck stood up and said, you know what, I will help support WeDig, which is the Westmoreland Economic Development Initiative for Growth. It's a collaboration of 5 municipalities, and we needed some startup funds, and we went and talked to Chuck about the need to collaborate, the need to have an impact on the area, and he actually helped support getting that organization up and running, and it's still running 8 years later. So the impact that he's had on the student lives that we see every day, the community that we are involved in now, our ability to get off this campus and get into the community, all of that we owe, in not a small part, to Chuck Booth.
At the heart of Burrell's business culture is a history of philanthropic commitment and leadership, benefiting their community, helping to make the Alley-Kiski Valley we call home a better place to work and raise a family.
Chuck Booth was nominated by committee member Gary Pallone. Mr. Booth is widely known for his generosity, paving streets for free, to donations that he makes all around the community that go without notice because he won't use his name. It was difficult getting him down here, but I'm glad we did. I benefited personally from Mr. Booth because I played for a Little League baseball team that he sponsored.
Chuck Booth has always been willing to donate his time and money for worthy causes. He often shied away from any public acknowledgement of his efforts. He just felt helping was the right thing to do.
There's a saying, if you find a job you truly love, you'll never work a day in your life. Because of Chuck Booth, that is true in my life. As a student at Penn State, I was hired in the mid-1970s for 2 summers as a laborer at Burrell Construction. The job paid $5.50 an hour. That's back when minimum wage was $1.10 an hour. In today's terms, that would be like paying a college student $40 an hour as a summer job. I saved that money over those 2 summers, and I was able to buy my first Nikon cameras. That led to a 37-year career as both a staff photographer and chief photographer at the Valley News-Dispatch. Because of Chuck Booth, I've had an amazing life. He's helped so many people along the way. On behalf of those people, I say thank you from the bottom of my heart and the depth of my soul.
While Chuck often wanted to avoid any public recognition for his random acts of charity, he made it possible for many local residents to advance their own careers.